Okay, call this meeting at 6:33 p.m. Welcome to the August 18th, 2025 meeting of the Library Commission. This is a hybrid meeting with commissioners, city staff, and members of the public participating in person at the Arriaga Family Recreation Center in accordance with public health guidelines for in-person meetings and the public participating remotely. Commissioners present include Commissioner Kim Crockett, myself, Chair Michael Herrick, Commissioner Carol Orton, Commissioner Sarah Sispod, Commissioner Scott Schaefer, Vice Chair Brian Westcott, and Commissioner Daniel Buell. Staff present include Library and Community Services Director Sean Reinhardt and Assistant Library and Community Services Director Nick Shedgar. Nick will be helping to facilitate this meeting, and Nick, will you please take a moment and provide instructions to the commission and members of the public in attendance on how the meeting will proceed.
Thank you, Chair. For members of the public who are attending this meeting virtually and wish to provide public comment, after the chair calls for public comment on the item you wish to speak on, please engage that raised hand feature at the bottom of your Zoom screen. For those who are calling in from a landline or cell phone, please press *9 to raise your virtual hand. Members of the public attending remotely who wish to speak, please take a moment to make sure your first and last name are updated on Zoom, or you may provide your name and the spelling as you are called to speak. Public comment will be heard in the order received and is limited to 3 minutes in length. For members of the public attending in person, there are speaker cards here in front of you on the table. Please complete one and turn it in to me before public comment is called for the item you wish to speak on. If there are a large number of public commenters, the time limit may be adjusted by the chair in order to allow everyone a chance to comment. When your turn for online public comment has arrived, I will unmute you before you can speak. And with that, I will return the meeting to the chair.
Okay, so we are under public comment. Under this section of the meeting agenda, the public may address the commission on any subject not listed on the agenda. Each speaker may address the commission once under public comment for a limit of 3 minutes. You are not required to provide your name or city of residence, but it is helpful. The commission cannot act on items not listed on the agenda, and therefore the commission cannot respond to non-agenda issues brought up other than to provide general information. Do we have any public comment on items not appearing on the agenda?
Does anyone wish to offer any public comment on an item not appearing on the agenda? Seeing no online attendee raised hands and no comment cards in person, you can proceed.
Okay, so we begin tonight with a study session reviewing the work of the ad hoc subcommittee. As part of this, staff will also make a presentation that was not initially listed on the agenda. Committee members will make a presentation, and we will take public comment and then open the item to the commission for discussion. So I guess I will ask the 3 members of the ad hoc committee, would you like to make a brief, you're gonna have the end of the discussion to manage the conversation after this presentation. Would you like to lead off with just introduction to this report that's in the agenda, or how do you want to?
Yeah, I could just give a short introduction and then the others can chime in or talk about it more later.
Yeah, we'll probably try to keep it, I don't know, to 5 or right now 5 or 10 minutes, then.
Yeah,
staff,
just briefly, I mean, I think that the memorandum and attachments are self-explanatory, so I'm not gonna go through and read all of it, but just the explanation of, this is the culmination of a year of work that the subcommittee, which was originally Commissioner Herrick, Commissioner Westcott, Commissioner Crockett, and then I subbed in recently when our chair took over and I joined the subcommittee, but I did do a number of things during the year as well. But this is something that we reported back to the Library Commission and library staff throughout the year. So this is not all brand new, but what and we have it marked top and bottom of each page as a draft, because we want to have an open discussion, get feedback from all of you and staff. And what we ultimately hope for is that perhaps with some revisions, this would get signed off on or approved by everybody on the commission and submitted to city council with the recommendations and explanation that we have in the memorandum. And then there's some other documents that are referred to in the footnotes that I think are all a part of the packet as well. But I want to first thank everybody on the commission for their patience with the process and the committee members for the hard work. It was a really very harmonious and interesting project. And also library staff that helped us with looking at data and understanding the issues. And the affinity groups and teams who participated in surveys and focus groups. So this is not just the three of us or four of us sitting in a room coming up with it. Really, we hope reflects a lot of input from the community and reflection back on work that's been done in prior years or decade. So that's my introduction. Now, Brian or Kim want to add anything more before we go through the process?
Commissioner Crawford.
I would echo everything that Commissioner Wharton said, and I would also extend thanks to the people who aren't here, the library staff who gave us tours and
Yes.
interviews and spent several hours of their time explaining their operations and their successes and challenges. It was fascinating, and I felt very grateful, lucky to be able to be a part of that. Really, all of this, as Commissioner Wharton said, is simply to get City Council to focus solely on the library in a study session. And to spend some real time considering some of the challenges and issues and things that are happening and that are going to be happening, so we could kind of help steer our library together.
Yeah, I just want to say, I think for me personally, just learning how important the library is to cities, towns, and actually Menlo Park. And and that we do have to pay attention to the library and the services. And the report is summarized in 5 recommendations, which, came out of all this work, but we felt that, it pointed a pretty clear direction, at least for the next round of review for the library and what its function is within Menlo Park.
Okay, so it's okay with the rest of the commissioners, there's no objection, I think we can move on to this staff presentation at this point, and then before we go to open it up for public comment, I'll give the commissioners themselves a little opportunity, I guess the subcommittee an opportunity to say anything further, but then we move it over to public comment and then commission discussion, if that work for everyone, not. So city staff, Nick, or Rashawn?
Yeah, I'll take that one. Let's see. Okay. So, yeah, thank you for the opportunity to offer staff's review of the subcommittee's draft recommendations. Just a few slides, which could be brief. A little bit of background. We know everyone already read the staff report, read the recommendations. So just a summary background. The ad hoc subcommittee was created and the scope of work defined on October 21st of 2024. As noted in the staff report, the scope of work is there on the screen. I won't read it verbatim, but just as a reminder what it is. The draft recommendations in the report were sent to staff on August 13th, so Wednesday last week, which was the day before the packet was to be published. So that was like kind of the first time that staff had really seen those recommendations or that report. Rather, we didn't really have time to kind of write up, this information and include it in the report, so that's why we're just presenting it now, just one more time. But we didn't want to, delay the subcommittee's report because we received it, right before publication. So just a few things, we did a review of the draft recommendations. Staff very much appreciates the subcommittee's efforts to conduct its own research without significant involvement from the staff, and there was some interviews and whatnot, but at least from the perspective of the assistant director and myself, we weren't aware of the recommendations or the report until we received it Wednesday. So, but really appreciate that kind of independent going out and doing more research. That's awesome. And staff does appreciate and release with some of the recommendations as presented. There's some really good stuff in there. However, staff has observed that some of the recommendations are based on incomplete data, so it's great that we're having a study session. We can kind of talk through, where some of that data is incomplete, how we might be able to kind of fill in some of those blanks. And, staff really welcomes and looks forward to the opportunity to working with the subcommittee, maybe a little more closely, to provide some of that additional data and expertise to help strengthen and refine this good work that's been started. So just quickly kind of go through a few, there's the 5 recommendations, so we thought best use of everyone's time since you've read the recommendations, is just to kind of do a slide on each one. So this one of the recommendations is about the departmental structure of library and community services. So just one thing we wanted to call out is that numerous other municipalities include and benefit from library and recreation in one unified department. For example, City of Sunnyvale, City of Pleasanton, library and recreation departments, Santa Fe, similar, same. Salinas, Huntington Beach, El Segundo, San Marino, Corona, in California, and many others. It's not really a unique or totally uncommon combination. I know that the libraries that were talked to by the ad hoc subcommittee are not structured that way, or we wanted to just note that there are many that are, in other states as well, including much larger cities, Eugene, Oregon, and a few others. So I just want to kind of point that out, so maybe that's something that should be kind of factored in to the recommendations and the future revision. We also noticed here in Menlo Park too, there's some other departments that have unified organizational structures that include multiple functions, like our administrative services department. It's got human resources, information technology, finance in the same department. Not uncommon in a city, especially the size of Menlo Park, to have multiple kind of related functions under a department. And just one example out of many is the multidisciplinary Belhaven Community Campus. As an example of the many synergies, efficiencies, and improved services that are made possible by this unified organizational structure. It's one building, it has all those functions in it. Makes a lot of sense for it to be operated, as one department because of all those synergies and efficiencies. Looking at recommendation number 2, I know we've mentioned this a few times, but we just want to call out that the Menlo Park's operating budget and staffing are authorized by City Council per its vision and direction for library services. And this is mentioned just to really emphasize that the City Council takes its responsibility very seriously to provide services to the community, to kind of meet their needs. And at no point in the past several years, at least since the pandemic, there was obviously a budget issue during the pandemic. At no point was there any kind of indication that we were in kind of like a deprived mindset as far as the budget, that we were not somehow not providing sufficient resources, from the City Council's perspective, to ride awareness the budget has been increased in recent years after the pandemic. So I just wanted to point that out, that the City Council does actually look very closely at what the needs are and provides resources accordingly. The city's budget, there was kind of a mention that it's not fully transparent online. And, I'd really like to kind of just remind the commission, I think as recently as May, we provided a pretty elaborate, detailed presentation of the department budget, including user-friendly tables and graphics that show the revenues and expenditures for every functional area in the department, including library, are clearly called out. From the top line summary, you can drill all the way into the line level. So if somehow we're missing the mark to make that information accessible, we would really like to understand how, so that we can try to improve the budget, which again, the budget is in like the overall city's format of we worked very hard to make it as user-friendly and accessible, really easy to pull out. Here's what the library's piece is. Similarly, we're sort of looking at, and again, this is all in the context of very appreciative of all the work. There's a lot of good work that has been done, but probably the most efficient use of time in this presentation is just to point out some of those areas that we think, hey, this would be a great opportunity for us to maybe work a little more closely between staff and the subcommittee to make sure that all the data is kind of there in the mix. Okay. And so one is when looking at some of the comparisons to other libraries, which it did seem like some of the recommendations were kind of leaning on. There were a number of key factors that we feel probably, if they were included, it would help better inform some of those recommendations. For example, on the population, which can vary quite a bit between even the libraries in the peer group. Looking at things like the library square feet per capita, and how that compares to other similar libraries. Expenditures per capita and how that compares. I think I saw a note somewhere in there about expenditures per capita, but these are some key data points that I think would be pretty helpful to kind of strengthen the subcommittee's work and ultimately what the library commission does with the revised recommendations. Another thing I did want to call out, I think we mentioned it before, so I just really want to make sure that it's in everyone's awareness is related to the number of staff at the library. There was a comparison of our library having 11 FTE to Burlingame having 23 FTE. But we did point out, and it's called out in the budget document, that a huge part of our workforce is comprised of temporary employees who comprise an additional approximately 11 FTE worth of hours. So just when there's those kind of comparisons to peer libraries, but we would just encourage that to be kind of apples to apples, show kind of the whole picture, because the comparison makes it kind of seem like we're understaffed, but it's not accounting for fully like half of our workforce. And those folks, those temporary employees, do an amazing job, and we really want to recognize and acknowledge that they're there working too, and they're a big part of why our library is open 7 days a week, and both locations, because we couldn't do it without them. So then moving on to number 3, here's one we totally agree, and not that we disagree with the previous one, just want to make that clear. We just see some opportunities to maybe work more closely together. But on number 3, that one's really agrees with that goal. Continuous improvement is absolutely what we're committed to, adapting services to the changing needs of our community. We know our community changes all the time, and we're constantly looking at how we can adapt those services. The most significant recent service change was the opening of the new Belhaven Library, the new community campus, a little more than a year ago. I think as this commission knows, that was informed by robust data collected over several months, involved the library commission, the city council. It was a big service change, used all that data to adapt our services. The services at Belhaven Library now are vastly different than the ones that were at the previous Belhaven Library. So just as an example of a very significant change that I think a number of the commissioners might recall being a part of. And even more recently, just one example of many, is the citywide survey that we conducted, which I believe the subcommittee used some of that data for their recommendations. Again, looking to gain insight into current and trending needs in the community. So again, we really agree with that recommendation, and we feel like this is probably at the core of what the ad hoc subcommittees actually want. So as defined by the library commission, is really about the programs and services. Not to the exclusion of other things, but that is the thing that's kind of called out in the scope. Looking at number 4, that was really kind of around analyzing deficits in the facility, the main library facility. Sorry for the typo there, facility. So staff agrees there are several opportunities for maintenance, repair, and renovation improvements, with no question about it. The Public Works Department manages the facility repair, maintenance, and renovation projects through the capital improvement program and other buildings related programs. Talk about that a little bit on the next slide. And to that end, the Public Works Department commissioned a facilities condition assessment, very detailed, of every city building in 2022. Had we been aware that this was something that the subcommittee was going to focus on, we would have recommended that you have a look at that assessment. Probably would have really helped. This Public Works Department really looks at that in the context of all the other facilities to kind of sort of map out how they use limited resources to kind of address facility needs in the near term and long term. So I think that's a pretty key piece of information that we want to share with the subcommittee and the commission when we talk about that facility in particular. And the final one is assessing the feasibility for a new library facility. So I mentioned the capital improvement plan annually. I just want to note that just recently as June, they approved the capital improvement plan. They look at all the facilities, all the needs, all the potential projects going forward. The city council has not directed staff to explore the feasibility of a new library at the Georgia Civic Center campus. That's after looking at all of those things. So we just want to kind of call out where when the city council last had, sort of that on their docket. They didn't give that direction to staff. That doesn't mean that can't change, but just wanted to kind of provide that context around this particular item. I did also want to note that the 2017 Main Library Species Study, besides being out of date, I did want to call out that it did have kind of a pretty significant drawback that came out later, which is that it didn't really account for the more critical need to replace the Belhaven Library at that time. It really, there was a lot of good things about that study, and I have a lot of respect for the firm, Nolan Town, that did it, but it completely missed that. And that as a result of, a lot of things happened. I think a number of us know about it, sort of in some of the background and other reports in this one. But there's definitely that flaw in that study. So you have to kind of take it with a grain of salt, besides the fact that it's now 8 years old and a little out of date. So staff does believe that additional analysis of the main library's facility needs and options for how we can address those needs, that could be helpful to future city council decision making. At the time, the city council kind of directs us to do that. And so staff really looks forward, obviously, to working with the library commission and subcommittee or some future iteration of the subcommittee. If we kind of go down that road, maybe that would be at the direction of city council. So just wanted to kind of give that additional kind of from a staff perspective. Really sorry that we couldn't get that into the staff report that went out in the packet, because that probably would have been helpful to have them side by side, and rather than kind of present them cold like this. But this was our earliest opportunity to do so after receiving the recommendations on Wednesday. So just to wrap up, again, staff really appreciates very much the ad hoc subcommittee's efforts. We look forward to continuing and building on that good work. And staff recommends that the library commission task the subcommittee to work closely with staff to provide some of the additional data I mentioned to help review and refine the report. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't want to open this up to discussion, so we're gonna have discussion after public comment, but I want to just give the ad hoc subcommittee, if you'd like to make a comment before we go to public comment, because this is sort of the presentation of the report. We didn't go through line by line through the report, as you mentioned, Commissioner Ward, probably not necessary if we all read it. But is there any need for further presentation or discussion before we open it up to public comment? We'll discuss that.
Well, we can talk about it after.
Yeah, for sure. That's most of the meeting will be that discussion. Are we good to go to public comment? No objection.
Yeah, because we'll further clarify that.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
So at this time, if you would like to make a comment on item D1, please indicate so to staff. Seeing no public comment indication online and none here in person, Chair, you can proceed.
Let me just ask a question. Is there anybody online? Can you tell?
There is, yes.
How many people?
There's one person on.
One, thank you.
There were two, but now there's one.
Thanks.
Okay, so we will open, this is our main item for today's meeting, and I have to note that actually some of our regular business that follows this, I'm at least in my chair's report that I have to give in about a week to city council. I'm looking forward to discussion. I think we've all admitted we're not moving toward like actual, voting in that way, but I feel like this is one of the more important discussions we'll probably have all year. So do we have a commissioner who would like to make a comment, or is it ad hoc something they want to say more first?
Well, like, maybe I'll start with recommendations to make. There's we have a lot of dependencies, so some of the comments you made are actually covered and we can go through. So first of all, the organizational structure is not just libraries, but that is based on a lot of expertise in organizational behavior and management practices. And so that's consistent with what we found, good libraries have. In terms of working with staff, a lot of the data for this was directly with staff. And we did comparable libraries, so all the numbers about population, square feet, all that was it's in the packet. So that was already covered. Trying to think other points. So, yeah, so there's some gaps in your knowledge as well that we can present to you, but that is, a lot of what you said is covered in the appendices and was done as part of the study. So, I guess, you know, we could, in the final report to council, all the appendices would be included. So,
Yeah.
You were saying, I'll have comments too, but do you?
No, I mean, I would echo what, Commissioner Westcott said, because, I think in terms of incomplete data, I think we were just very upfront about getting the data and working with staff to get it and working with the comparable libraries that had similar populations and similar demographics as well, to try and do the best analysis we could to advise and make recommendations, but just sort of flag those issues. And for the city council, the overarching goal is for the city council to really spend some time with us, and not for us to be giving them answers or solutions or even influence it that much, just that they dedicate a study session to these general issues of challenge that the library faces into the future.
And I would say, I thank you, I appreciate your comments, we tried to anticipate some of that, and I think that the data and the attachments hopefully will address it, but of course, I think it would be a good idea to continue refining, this is not like a final thing, this is just our effort to put it on the table so we could all talk about it and discuss it. And so certainly making sure that things are presented in a balanced way and with accurate data. I'm all for that. But I would also note that we met multiple times with our city council liaison to talk about these issues, and also with 3 other city council members. And part of why we are asking for this study session is that even though I know that their priorities are, you know, we don't have power, they're the ones with power, we're just giving them feedback and direction. But it became clear to us that they have so much on their plates. And some of them weren't around during all the previous analysis that was done in the libraries for the need for Bellhaven, et cetera. So it just seemed like sitting down and having a really thoughtful discussion where they're not distracted by all the other things that they're currently, it's not gonna be about downtown parking or about all the other many issues. So this document was a reflection of some of the feedback we got from them with the issues that they wanted to understand better, and acknowledge that a new library was put on hold years ago, and rightfully Bellhaven was put to the front of the line. But maybe the Nolan Tams didn't talk about Bellhaven in their report, so maybe their report's out of date, but it's certainly things have not gotten better, condition wise in terms of the facility in the last 7 or 8 years. So, seems to me all those topics are ones that we just want them to discuss, and for sure staff will be involved in all that, and feedback from community members and affinity groups. So I still think that, you know, we could tweak it some, or maybe we wait to give it to them, but we agree that your presentation on the 26th, we would include a request for a study session. This is not like, it probably wouldn't happen until after the first year. They have a lot of other things on their agenda, but multiple city council members have suggested to us that this would be a good idea. So that what didn't come from us initially, we think it's a great idea.
I would add just, again, that these discussions with city council members specifically encouraged us to do this in this way. and gave us advice about a study. That was where the idea of the study session came from. Because it isn't our job to figure out the answers to this. It is to uncover the issues so that they can have a public discussion and get the feedback in a better way. We're just the advisory body, advise in this manner.
Can I, sort of offer Mr. Schaefer the spot, and you will, and I have some thoughts and comments too, but does one of you want to make a comment or at this point, and instead of go on to?
I guess I have, sort of, I'm not quite sure how to formulate, I haven't quite enough time to think it all through, so, I think that the part to me that's a little bit confusing, because it sounds like there's a completely different story coming from the subcommittee versus what I just heard from the staff, which is about staffing at the library. So, part of the subcommittee's recommendations, there are all these programs and services that we could be offering that we are not able to offer because we have a small number of full-time staff. So they're just not able to be evaluated, where we just heard there that actually it's fine, we don't have any need for extra staff, and the programming that we have is sufficient to meet the population, and that seems inherently contradictory, no matter how many tendencies there are, or outside, things, so I guess, so I'm not even sure the questions, I guess, which is that seems like a fundamental thing, so that's something I'd like to hear more about, maybe from both the subcommittee and also from the staff members. Yeah, that's my comment.
Well, the statistics we use on full-time actually came from staff. We work with staff and we focused on full-time because our understanding, and again, this was through discussions with librarians and staff, is to have programs, you really need full-time people. The part-time people don't necessarily manage programs. And so there's a difference between having full-time equivalents and full-time employees. So we purposely, in the appendix, which we need to get to you guys, show full-time equivalent and the sum where we're still short. But there is a need for full-time employees, and that would increase maybe our programs, because we're short programs in some comparisons to like libraries with like populations, like budgets. So that's why we focused on it.
Okay, so there are some like examples of programs that we're not doing that we could be doing.
Well, not necessarily examples, but numbers. So, comparison of how many programs we have versus like population, like libraries.
Gotcha.
And, but what did come out, which, is again in the appendix, is our staff is extremely productive for the number of full-time equivalents, and the number of programs per full-time equivalent is very good. It's just, the gap. And some other things that came out, which maybe we should emphasize, is I think our general consensus, the numbers and then talking to people, is the staff is very good at the Menlo Park libraries. They work hard, they have, longer hours. But somehow you guys keep the libraries open more than equivalents with many more full-time equivalents. The library hours are good. The programs per full-time equivalent are very good. The number of inquiries is off the charts compared to some other libraries per staff member. So, the staff is very good. That was very good.
I would say, you asked about examples of programs
Yeah,
that perhaps we don't have, the ESL programs, English as a second language, homework center. We don't have things that require staffing and consistent staffing. Or things, there's a couple more examples but there are examples of that.
And I could actually add to that, back when I was on the ad hoc committee, I recall, Rose Waldman, she was mentioning things that do involve full-time staff in order to get them done, and I think one of the things that I keep strongly upon in this community is the city library staff are wonderful and very efficient, I think it's shown. I think the my son is in the Menlo Park City School District, there are three that intersect with our city. They are also, as I understand things, very well run, fiscally responsible and everything else, but there's been difficulty getting the teaching librarians and the city librarians together. Rose mentioned this in one of her first presentations, that it takes time, communication takes time, so that might be an example of something where we are perhaps not, I mean, especially over the Bellhaven community, I think, where I learned there used to be a librarian, now there's only a volunteer as a result, not as a direct result of opening the Bellhaven community campus, but I think there are things sort of under the radar. You know, we had enough professional, I won't say we have enough, but I think probably what's being brought out in comparison with the libraries is it's time intensive to provide really good library services, and our city staff are clearly doing that, I think. But I think if we really delve into programming and other things that we saw at peer libraries in the Bay Area, you know, everyone could always use more staff, so I don't think we can make an argument to council they can hire more. But I would say as an initial comment, I think we're in a great spot, and I'm just amazed that the ad hoc committee got a report like this by August. When I was on it, like, Brian, there's no way, we need to put it to November. And I think the fact that the city staff came back so quickly in August with, as Sean rightly notes, the first sort of official, just sort of like reading of the report and the findings of the ad hoc committee, I feel like we're in an excellent position, especially if the city council is asking sort of for a study session. And I sort of note in the first, to give you due, Sean, I mean, I think the first two recommendations begin with the Birdie Valley waiver. So I don't think, you know, maybe correct me if I'm wrong, I'm not sure the ad hoc committee is really making any sort of recommendation, like, we need to hire more staff, or we need to have the library as a separate department. And I think it's just more a question of evaluate, and that's why I think there can be good things coming over the next few months or even half a year before we do not do a study session, if we can have a study session. I think exactly what you're talking about, Sean, I think could be the focus of this commission for several more months and really continue this conversation. So I just want to thank the ad hoc committee, especially for the work they did, especially this summer, because when I went off of it, it just took off. So I think Commissioner Wharton, you got a good jet fuel in your report writing and collaborative work with your commission members. So those were my general comments. I have a few sort of questions and things, but I don't know if anyone else wants to make more comment first before I get into.
Well, so I had a question, and I'm going to apologize, this might be a little open-ended. But I'm curious what sort of your experience of the library getting merged into sort of broader Parks and Recreations has been in terms of the impact that that's had on how the organization has operated and been able to do things like you mentioned that it wasn't able to do before. Just because I joined the commission right after the opening of the Bellhaven Center, and so my experience of that has been sort of after the fact. And so I'm just curious, as we're talking about ways in which those departments being merged or separate functions, what your experience of that has been.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think similar to many of our peers that also have that combination. Some of the key kind of benefits have been, first of all, that staff are able to kind of move from the different specialties. You know, so we have recreation staff who supported library programs, library staff who supported recreation programs. We've had staff who got transferred from the library to the childcare, from the childcare to the library, from the library to recreation or to the senior center. At times where we need to create, like, say, an intergenerational program, which we did recently at the Bellhaven Community Campus, where senior center users are doing crafts and other activities with young children that has a literary component. You know, the staff is already right there working on the same team. They're meeting regularly, weekly in some cases, monthly in others. They're all part of the same team. We avoid a lot of duplication of services in some other cities where the library and the recreation departments are separate, depending on how well they work together or collaborate or not. They might, as Menlo Park once did, offer like kind of a robotics program in the library for free and a kind of similar robotics program on the recreation side for a fee, with residents going, why are there these two different things? And now in the same department, we don't have that kind of duplication. And I think again, just sort of getting back to one of the examples on the slide, with a facility, that actually combines those functions in the very same building, it's very advantageous to have the staff be on the same team, in the same department, all meeting together and collaborating together regularly. So I could go on with a lot of other examples, but I think overall, the feeling is a broader level of support, more team members, more different perspectives and experiences to enrich the services to the community, and a more holistic, unified, all-in-one approach to serving community members.
Yeah, thank you, I appreciate the clarification.
Thank you.
I have another clarification I'd ask of the ad hoc subcommittee, and I know the peer group libraries and the research and analyst database involved two staff members who are not here this evening, so they might need to help you answer this question, maybe in a future meeting come back. This was the peer group, and I'm sort of looking at sort of page 40 of 39 and 40 of the sort of the whole agenda packet, and this is where it starts with Belmont Public Library with Beverly Hills, and I'm familiar with this because I helped to give some information to create it, but is the peer group that entire group, so include Hayward and Palo Alto and larger ones, that's the peer group, correct?
Right.
Okay, and I noticed throughout the appendices, we tried to, or Rose probably helped a lot of this, to trying to get comparisons where possible, like per capita and things like that, but I think that probably speaks to Sean talking about the data, that I have to say, I'm amazed about this and Rose must have helped a lot to get it done,
Right.
but that would probably be an example of what Sean was talking about, right? We've got peer group. But there's a mix there in terms of even calling it peer group, there's a geographic peer group, right, and then there's sort of like communities.
Well, demographics.
Yeah.
And then if you look at the two peer groups, they're amazingly similar. If you take Menlo Park and compare them to the overall peer group, it's, the numbers line up amazingly well. And that was your work.
Yeah, I should.
If I may,
Yeah, go ahead.
Since you brought up the topic,
Yeah.
so this helps kind of illustrate what I was saying about some other data that I think could be factored in to improve, like when we're talking about peer groups. Actually, I previous to coming to Menlo Park, I was the library and community services director of Hayward, for example. Now Hayward is a city of 160,000 people, and the Menlo Park's population is about like a fifth of that. And Hayward's located in Alameda County, much different socioeconomic makeup in Hayward compared to Menlo Park. Just a lot of kind of some pretty noticeable differences between the two communities. Now, I love Hayward, it's my hometown, and we're all in the Bay Area, so there's that similarity. But when starting to compare numbers of like staff and program outputs and things like that, when you have a budget, communities like Hayward, even Palo Alto, although it's right next door, that their population is triple of what Menlo Park is. So I think it would be really, and I appreciate that the subcommittee talked to some of the line staff using data that's compiled at the state and national level. But I think it would be really helpful to kind of like focus in on some of these peer libraries so that we can really talk about the similarities and some of the differences. And maybe if we want to keep that group, that's good, but it's fine. But some like that per capita data is pretty helpful so that you're getting closer to comparing apples and apples when you're, especially when you're just like looking at the numbers.
Yeah, the Hayward was included because it was one that we visited, but the data is good as is data.
Okay.
Yeah,
So that's
I would
fine,
say
because
to
it's
your
the
point.
similar size city.
Yeah, we
and
did,
it is fine.
if you look at some of the results, we did adjust for demographics as well. We did per capita and things like that.
Yeah, we did analysis of Burlingame and Los Gatos, which are really the most analogous cities. And talked about that, because those truly are almost exactly the same population size, demographic profile, per capita, and space, facility, everything that you had, I think, mentioned in the slide. So, and talked about that, I think, Brian, in the report that you were involved with Rose. You did some analysis on Burlingame,
Right, specifically. 'cause that was a very-
specifically, and in the report, I think we also included analysis of Los Gatos as well. because it is, to your point, almost exactly the same as our community.
And I might add, conclusions of the recommendations of the commission came from multiple triangulation. You know, we had focus groups, we had interviews with people, we had data, we had talks with the staff, you know, library visits. So there's not one data source that really was the focus of the conclusions. The recommendations came from multiple, what you call triangulated data sources.
So Nick, I don't know if you can go just to the next page, so it's probably page 40, yeah, so I. Hearing all these comments, I think it would be great as we successfully go from draft to whatever this becomes in terms of a formal report that goes beyond this commission discussion this evening. I think it would help, I'm assuming all libraries means all libraries in the IMLS database, is my guess, right? And peer group is all of those libraries just on the page before, your library is obvious, and so I think whether or not you keep one peer group as is, and I respect Commissioner Washington is saying that, you know, all the data lines up and everything, but I think it would be helpful for, if there were to be a study session with council, that might be one area to draw out more specifically. Even have two different types of peer groups or one, but just define that better so that people aren't in a large study session and valuable time with council saying, oh, we're comparing apples and oranges, and then you really sort of say, yes. But these were pretty much the oranges and these are pretty much the apples. We did this comparison for this reason, this for that. So I applaud you on putting this all in one simple chart, but I would say probably note the complexity as well.
All right, well, we can do a statistical analysis and see if the groups are comparable. Plus, in this study, there is a case study, which Commissioner Crockett cited for Burlingame, which is very similar in, you know, in the region and demographics and housing prices and, you know, the other thing when you're looking at data is how big are the gaps? You know, this isn't down to the decimal point. The gaps are pretty big.
So, and I appreciate that, because I read this for the first time today, but when I got beyond into all the actual analysis, I respect that. I think you were always calling out when you're making comparison and like, and it's compared this way for this reasons. But I just sort of saying in a public discussion, it'd be good to point that out, to say, don't just take my words and give a few examples, this is why. So I just think it's, you know, the amount of work you want to do here, I think is sort of a starting point.
If there's a study session, I'm assuming that all those very detailed comparisons, addressing the comments that Sean made and what, I mean, this is our drive to try to get them to set up a study session and to start thinking about the different issues that relate to the library. I don't know that we have to have all of that analysis and agree on the apples and the oranges right now. We could make it an absolute agenda item that needs to get done before in preparation of our study session.
I think it's a wonderful plan. So I don't want to beat this topic for too long, already almost an hour into the meeting, we do have to some things in terms of our work plan for the coming year, which I think Commissioner Orton just suggested a good topic for a work plan. And the presentation meeting to council. The one other thing that I just wanted to get the ad hoc committee's thoughts on, and also maybe city staff, is number 5, the feasibility study. So what's being called a recommendation right from the start of the report. And it involves going back to, I know work that was done 10 years ago, they've already had some discussion this evening about comparisons of that. Would the ad hoc committee consider, instead of immediately assess feasibility financing options and timing for a new library facility, you know, on the city's, you know, I feel like a master planning process that's done from the library's perspective, but is maybe hybrid and integrative of other master planning processes simultaneously happening across this community would be really helpful. And so the one sort of thing that I would, you know, before we recommend this out as a report or something like that, I would ask the ad hoc subcommittee to consider, maybe with city staff, whether that could be reworded to talk about master planning for 3 reasons. you know, what I said already, a decade ago, they had this process focused on a building. Maybe without comprehensive master planning that showed this is how Bellhaven community fit into that. That I think it would much more likely to be successful, any potential building sort of recommendation we had master plan. Also, I've worked on two of these things where we've gone from a library directly in our architect's office, they want to build a building, want to do this, like. Well, even if you haven't done the master planning, we as architects need to refer to a master plan, so we're gonna do this in 3 weeks with you or 3 months with you, so even architectural firms will force you to do that, so I would say. Do it as a city, do it as a community before jumping to any sort of, like, even approaching council for that feasibility and financing options, so.
I think number 5 could be reworded, because that was actually the context in our discussion with at least one of the city council members, is that this, we need to look at what the long-term plan is, but it needs to be part of a bigger review. It could be phase 1, but it has to be included. And I know that it's not currently on the capital improvement plan, but it has been suggested to us that it's not too early to start planning for the one that comes next. And that, if this is something that people are interested in, now's the time to lay the groundwork and start thinking about it, because it takes a while, as you know. So that's why number 5 is there, but I think it makes a lot of sense to tweak that wording to make it clear that this would be something that should be considered and thought about as they're looking at master plan for other parts of the civic center campus.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I think it makes a lot of sense, to change the wording in, or also add. The alignment with city council priorities. And how the library and the civic center campus, with everything that's going on in the Middlefield corridor. How that fits in as well to serve the city and its priorities, and activating downtown as well. The library sits at the center geographically of all of that happening. And that was part of at least 2 of the conversations we had with city council members. And they saw alignment with that, so I think it probably would make sense for us to. Talk about that in number 5, because, like, Commissioner Harris, it is worded. A little bit cart before the horse, is that kind of what?
That's what architects say, actually.
Yeah.
I've been in this process twice before, and so.
That's fair. That's fair.
And also, in recommendation number 2, and to sort of be fair to the ad hoc committee, it's just the projected needs of the community. So I think, Sean, when you were talking about the budget, and we haven't heard this than the other, I think it looks to me like the wording of number 2 about budget is really talking about what Commissioner Orton was just saying. You got to sort of project out a decade to do things well, to do all the planning. So unless you guys are
No, and
beating the
again,
drum to go to council, say, hire more staff right now.
it was part of like, what are we doing now? And look at all the housing that's going to be, it's getting approved and it's gonna be happening. How are we, it takes so long to plan for things. We don't wanna just be reactive. We wanna be proactive and planning ahead because it takes so long. So again, number 2, that projected needs of the community, again, that was integrating comments we got from city council about this overall need that we have.
Right, on that point, if I may, a great conversation, and just sort of, I appreciate. The emphasis that this is a draft, that, some additional word refinement, and I think maybe consultation, maybe with some more senior level staff would be
Yeah.
helpful to prepare. I think what the subcommittee and ultimately the library commission would probably need to take in action, which is not on the agenda tonight, to, put a report to the city council. But for things like, projected needs of the community, the library services based on potential population growth because of new housing units. Just for your awareness, and here's where the senior staff, I think, can help. Every development proposal of a certain size, which pretty much is all of them, unless it's just someone putting an ADU in their backyard. It does include those kind of assessments on a development by development basis. What is going to be the additional need for school services or police services or fire services or library services? So we just want to help the subcommittee and the library commission to kind of have that work that's already there in mind and factored in, so it's not like a reinvention of the wheel, and so that when you're wanting to make your advice and recommendation to the city council, that it's kind of got everything fully baked in, so that, you know, it's not kind of a, needing to go back to the drawing board and kind of double check figures, or, you know, add in some considerations that, you know, like information that already exists that maybe hasn't already been brought in, you know, that's how we can help. And so that's I think why it's a key part of our recommendation is to kind of work more closely with the ad hoc subcommittee, to kind of help refine this with that staff perspective, and I think the senior staff, they can have a little bit more of an insight into what's happening in some of the other areas of the city. And say the library.
So you're agreeing with number two, that what we said is with the needs of the community.
Oh, well, we're always evaluating every year when we do the budget. Are we meeting the current need and in the future year? But I think the comment was about developments and population growth. And just so you're aware, like the community development department usually leads, but they always do actually for every proposal. They go to every department, like, let's do that assessment. Is that going to result in additional need? And some of this kind of gets back to even just looking at the comparables. When you look at like square footage of library space per capita, I would encourage the subcommittee, let's go ahead and look at those numbers and how we compare on that metric. Expenditures per capita, you can find that Menlo Park is pretty high up there. So, you know, we just want to have a look at some of those things.
Yeah, okay, so number two does talk about needs of the community. It doesn't have a time, it didn't say today's needs, it's implied that it's today's and future. So I think we're in agreement.
We're always looking at,
Yeah.
are we meeting?
Region, yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So I think that maybe gets to where I'd like to, if possible, we'll start wrapping the discussion here in the time, so we can get to sort of what I might say next week in city council, which is not, you know, we hear the report and everything else that agreed on that.
So, but before we do
Yeah.
that, can we just have a better understanding of, like what needs to happen next in terms of satisfying, there's some need to like work together to make this report reflect staff, input. And then at some point, there needs to be an action item, is that what you're saying, that we need, it wasn't enough just to, have this draft, you're saying that we have to have it on the agenda as something that the library commission needs to vote on, we couldn't have voted on it tonight, you're saying?
I see you looking at me, so I'll answer that question. So a couple of things. The subcommittee, by definition, is not a quorum or majority
Yeah.
of the commission. Right, so I believe this is the library commission, the full commission's first look at all of this information. I think at the top of the meeting, I heard subcommittee members say, oh, we want to have a discussion about this, it's draft. Want to have that conversation, you know, to incorporate that feedback. And so, you know, it's not possible to like kind of do that all in one take, right? This was calendared with chair, vice chair as a study session for that purpose. Actions are not taken during the study session. It would need to come back if it was like a report that was kind of finalized and was being like transmitted to the city council. It would need the full commission, majority of the commission, like vote. And ideally, you would get a unanimous. I mean, that's not necessary. So, you know, I think to some points made earlier, like it's a process. This is kind of a good first start. It's gotten a lot of things on the table, got some good kind of points that needs some additional discussion and possibly refinement or clarification. But yeah, it's just, I think, the nature of a subcommittee. That's why that subcommittee was able to be, you know, not.
No, I just mean in terms of how do we move to the next steps without having it be studied and studied and studied and studied.
So can I propose a way to get through the evening, and then
Yep.
before we move on, because I don't want to end discussion here, I'll say, first of all, the very end of the agenda, I have left one slide blank, which has I put 3 outcomes, or might only be 2, that I'm going to tell the council about this last year's work plans that we've done. So we're gonna have an opportunity then to really define the wording of, you know, study session or whatever we as a commission would like tonight, me to say, that's not a report out formally. So on that point, as long as it's agreed, I think we're going to say something to council next week about all this great work. Second, I wonder if, I'm hearing that we could line up when we even do our work plan right now that we're submitting to council, you could have, put in a couple of sub bullet points saying by the October meeting. Full commission and city staff will X, Y, and Z or something like that, so we have that agenda item coming up too, so we can continue to discuss this and actually sort of agendize an action. Does that work for everyone, so that we can?
Yeah.
I need to go find, I gotta turn my taking notes on the wrong side. All right, so are we ready, if we're agreed that we're through, D, study session, then we'll move on to regular business, and under regular business, the chair of the library commission considers recommendations from city staff on policy matters or administrative actions that require library commission approval. We'll begin regular business, item E1, approve the minutes from July 21st, 2025 meeting. Nick, do we have any public comment on this item?
Any public comment on item B1? Hearing online and no comment in person.
Okay, would a commissioner like to make a motion to approve the minutes? Commissioner Crockett, motions, do we have a second for
A
that?
second,
Commissioner Wharton?
So the motion is to approve the minutes from the July 21st, 2025 meeting. Commissioner Crockett, how do you vote?
yes.
Chair Herrick, how do you vote?
I guess I can say yes, but here. It's not a problem.
Commissioner Orson, how do you vote?
Yes.
Commissioner Sisbot, how do you vote?
Yes.
Commissioner Schaefer, how do you vote? Yes. Vice Chair Westcott, how do you vote?
Yes.
And Commissioner Yule, how do you vote? Yes. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
The next item is E2 to recommend the library commission's work plan for the coming year. Staff will provide a brief introduction to the item, we'll take public comment and then begin our discussion.
So, very briefly, we had a look at this, a draft. Sort of had two looks at this. We had a discussion a couple meetings ago, and then an information item last month where we had the draft that incorporated some of the elements of the discussion. So this is as it exists now. And so at this point, we are asking the commission to make any final changes to their work plan goals so that they can be presented to the city council in September. And that concludes my introduction / presentation.
Are there any public comments on that, Nick?
Any public comments on item E2? Seeing no comments.
Okay, so would a commissioner like to make a comment? Question?
And I think it accurately reflects the comments that we made last time. Good job, Nick.
Yeah, to your point earlier, Chair, if we do want to add a specific work plan item related to the sort of finalization of this report, it might work best under goal number 1. That sort of catch-all provision of providing it's serving as a forum and a way to get issues to city council's attention.
Are there other thoughts?
Isn't what we are doing as a subcommittee under the umbrella of number 2 and 3?
Yeah, we can.
I agree with that, and I also agree with this, because I mean, I think we're at, the number 1 is really the advisory body of the city council, so if we really are moving toward a time when we would like to make advice or engage the city council in a study session to really work like, if it maybe Commissioner Schaefer has a point that if we wanna put a sub bullet under things, we might wanna do it under 1 and 2, or 1, 2, and 3, if you wanna try to put, because this would then. The city council has to vote on this work plan, right, and sort of approve it within the coming month or two, so that would be an opportunity for them. Both to maybe comment on, oh, our calendar is way too busy, we can't consider this till 2028, which I think might. Should be problematic, I don't think they'll do that, but do we want to add under 1, 2, and or 3? Something a little more time-based, like, so that it doesn't, because I have heard you reported that the council don't like to study things forever, so do you want to give them an opportunity to sort of say in the fall of. Or, so I think review number 2, we could do something where it's like specifically, by December 2025, work with city staff on a lot of the things that have been mentioned this evening, I don't have to say it succinctly, but that would be one option. To try to time base, there's a desire.
I mean, well, this is more of a question, but 2 and 3 right now are just repeats of last year's work plan. Knowing that we've made progress and we're satisfied with this, we should probably allude to that. Or specifically state that, take, as per city council's recommendations or direction. Take appropriate next steps in review of library programs and services.
Or we could just say, continue to. review
Continue,
and
yes,
Continue to
continue.
analyze in number 2 and 3.
With obviously city council, feedback or direction. However, that should be worded, but right now, we're going to have to wait on, the ball will be in their court to give the commission. Feedback and direction on 2 and 3.
If I may, I do know that Chair Herrick has the opportunity to speak with the city council about past year's work toward the work plan on August 26th, right, so a week from tomorrow. And I think I heard you mentioning, Chair, I think, is it the next item of the report out on the agenda? So maybe these two should flip order, but that is the next opportunity coming up for a message from the library commission to the chair about, here's the work that we have been doing. What I heard, which I think was sort of new to my awareness tonight, was one of the look for kind of outcomes of the subcommittee's work was that the city council would call a study session specifically about the library. So I think the question that I, as I understand it, like that's different from what's here in this work plan is that called out here somewhere?
And that's what I was gonna suggest, actually.
Study session.
Instead of continue review and analyze and evaluate, I would say expand review of library program and service to the citywide. I was, we are citywide as a library commission, but there's a way to, as Sean is saying, make it clear to the city council that we intend this year to broaden the discussion beyond the library commission. Because I think, to your point, the ad hoc committee's been meeting all year, reviewing and analyzing, and the full commission is only,
But
improving updates.
Full commission has been apprised every
For
month
sure.
of all the activity. It's not like we just did this and.
But for the full year work plan, I think we might wanna make it very clear that we're not just continuing to review, continue to analyze, that we are making an effort. Mr. Yule, do you have an idea?
There is already the word advise in there.
Yeah.
Which I took to mean advise city council, not just ourselves.
Right.
So if we could maybe make that more clear, time based, like advise by the end of the year or something like that, in number 2 specifically, I was saying.
And maybe, Sean, if you think we could add advise city council simply, right, to make that clear, because we do a lot of advising of staff on a monthly basis, but making it clear by city council to number 2. That work, very simple 2-word edit.
Where city council to be clear, that's all to the good, who are you advising, number 2. Let's just maybe put a fine point on it. The adoption of the work plan, which it says approved on this draft, that's what it would say, it was approved on September. It's calendar, I think, for September 9th, would get the other, a number of other commission work plans, but here would be the opportunity for the commission to insert something like request a study session at the city council on this topic during this upcoming meeting.
Yeah.
You know, request.
Yeah.
Yeah, so if that's what you want, and then the city council could see that. And can decide whether or not that's something that's, you know, they want to put on the agenda or consider or not. So, you know, that's kind of like the opportunity to just make that like crystal clear.
What my concern is the request for a study session, I was hoping would be in with a context, an explanation, which the final version of this memo would provide. And so, just putting a bullet point request a study session without providing any of the background or reasoning for it, I would be afraid they'd do a, you know, line out you out.
You know, that's actually a good point, so, and again, I don't wanna wordsmith your work plan bullet for you, but I think it's kind of sounded like there was an invitation to try to include this notion in here. So, you know, maybe just to reiterate kind of what you're saying is complete this analysis that the ad hoc subcommittee started, present it to city council, and request a study session to explore it further, something like that. So that you can just put it on there, hey, here's what we plan to work on in the coming year, city council, culminating in this thing, which we would like you to be involved in. And then the city council, we need to kind of know what's coming, it would open, you know, the possibility for discussion around that.
Would it be possible, and this is pretty radical, but I did think 2 and 3 are sort of together almost, and we could consider doing a semicolon or the space to make them all under number 2, and then put 2 hyphen points under what would become 2, which is really 2 and 3 together, which is about inviting city council to do exactly what Sean says. Note that we will submit a report to city council. We don't have to time base it, but ideally, you know, here by October, and then ask for a study to make it clear that would lead to a study session. Because in order for this commission to fill its work plan, it needs city council's input. And if we're to get our work done by the end of the year, we need them to, if they're gonna have a study session, get it agendized, as you say, by January, February. If we have it agendized next July, we're not gonna do the work.
But I think your point
Agree.
about schedule is we need a schedule, because if we say continue analysis with a culmination of a study session, that's not gonna happen until next year. And we actually got direction from some of the city council members that they're getting tired of analysis. So I think your point about putting like finalize the recommendation, ask for a study session sometime in October, November timeframe, and then let city council react and say, well, we can't do it in October, but we'll do it in November.
I think
So-
wording it so that we're going to have to wait on them for their direction and their feedback in the study session. Is important, because they need, that is the request, and that moves the needle, otherwise we are in this analysis paralysis
Right.
doom loop. And which is not what the city council said they wanted specifically.
But
Yeah.
we do
Here's
what
what I'm gonna do.
They
I wanna make sure, I wanna just make sure to get this in while you're on this point in particular. I do just really wanna make, sort of a clarification that the city council as well is subject to the Brown Act, and that conversations with individual city council members do not necessarily mean an action or decision or direction by the city council. So that, you know, that discussion would need to happen at the city council.
Right,
For it to be actionable. So, you know, I do understand there were conversations with individual council members, and I'm just sharing this, you know, just like respecting, looking out for the commission and the council about just like really keeping that in mind. And so that's why, you know, talking about how do you surface this so the city council can have that conversation, you know, together in that context, in the view of the public.
Absolutely, that's why the request for the study session is so paramount, because that conversation needs to be had in public, and it needs to be, used for the commission work plan to take next steps on 2 and 3. Commissioner Herrick, you mentioned collapsing 2 and 3, the only reason why I would not do that is because, goal 2 or work plan 2 is truly our libraries, our whole, Bellhaven as well as Maine, the 2 facilities. And 3 is simply the facility at Maine. So it's really a very separate issue.
And if I could, I'm sorry to keep interjecting, because I'm sorry, I'm in between to put a Word version of the document up here, because there's some wordsmithing that seems to be happening in the moment. And we don't want to lose track of it, and this is going to be presented to the city council September 9th. So the commission will not have another opportunity to review it before then. So just a couple of suggestions there is, to the extent that any changes from this point can be, try to be light touch while also capturing what you're trying to do. And with the understanding that you would need to take a vote on it tonight. And we want to be very clear what it is, so got this on the screen.
Who's typing, Sean or Nick?
I've got it on the screen.
Okay.
I'm scribbling.
Okay.
As long as I repeat this down, I'm trying to do two things at once. So I didn't incorporate any of the edits that were spoken of. There was an earlier one that was saying continue to at the beginning, but we're not doing that anymore.
No, I think that actually you suggested something that I think maybe is the most clear, so leave 1, 2, and 3 the way they are, but maybe add a paragraph that says, complete the work begun by the subcommittee and Library for the Future, resulting in a report that would be submitted to city council by X date, and along with the request for a study session to be scheduled.
Yeah.
Something along those lines, that was just off the top of my head, but,
Right, cause
so that alerts them that we're continuing this work, that Michael will have already told them about it on this 26th. And then we want to give them a report, and that report's gonna ask them for a study session. And we'll work out all these other, finer points of what's in the report for them.
And this is-
So I was only able to type like a portion of that, and I just want to make sure that
Okay.
you see on the screen there what we've got right at the bottom there in red.
We like to call it the subcommittee for the Library of the Future rather than ad hoc, so because it's more descriptive of what.
for the subcommittee's library, sure, ad hoc. Well, no, I would say complete the work of the library of the future ad hoc subcommittee. So you'd have to reverse it.
Okay, and what were the, I will do that, what are the other elements of the,
But I think we're gonna say, once we get this wording right, let's stay there, so if we can flip. We put the Commissioner Crop, Westcott's point over that in front.
the one with the red, is there a few different comments floating around there? Oops. Turn on the screen, sorry. Sorry about that. Complete the work of the Library of the Future ad hoc subcommittee.
Okay, and then can I suggest by, so by by one recommending a report to city council in the fall, or if you want to put a month, I don't think it's too early.
Well, not recommending, we're delivering.
Yeah,
We're not recommending.
But we have to if correct me if I'm wrong, Sean and Nick, but I believe in order for us as a full commission to pass this as a formal report, we do need to vote, just as there's a study session, so we will recommend in our October meeting, this report to go to council, correct? Is that, or is there another way to do it?
But we want the report to go to the council in October, so we would have to vote it.
we would have to do that work to
And is that enough time to do all the,
Oh, yeah.
cities, no, but for city staff to, because Sean, we wanna work with city staff as much as we can. If it's not possible, obviously, the commission will move forward, but.
You know what I would recommend is to not put a specific month on there and give yourself some room to maneuver, because I'll just say that so far, it's taken quite a bit of time to even produce a report a draft report that the full commission has seen, and I just wanna be like realistic about timeframes for getting a finished product that the full commission can recommend that staff can get behind. It could happen by October, but I think when there's some question, it would be good to maybe not have into quite so specific of a date. And that's not trying to delay or engage in analysis paralysis, it's just the kind of eyes looking over me, is that realistic? And my answer is, I'm not sure what it is, and I wouldn't commit the commission to that type of a timeframe that's 2 months away.
Okay, and to give an alternate point of view, the ad hoc subcommittee did have a schedule and we did need it, so it didn't take any longer than we had predicted. In fact, we're ahead of schedule.
Well, the report's not complete, right?
Well, no, but the delivery to the committee was scheduled for later in years. And I think it's important to have scheduled dates because things don't get done without a schedule. So we have a disagreement on project management, but I think it's important to put dates. To get
That's what the commission wants to put in here. I just wanted to share that, my suggestion would be to really think through what's a realistic timeframe for getting it across the finish line.
I think if we don't put a date on it, it will get lost.
Yeah,
We have other thoughts on date, no date among other commissioners before, perhaps it's sort of.
Could we have a date further in the future, maybe, so that we have some wiggle room, it can still happen earlier, as you just said, you completed the previous one. Early, so if we said by the end of the year, but then you actually finish it in October. That would be fine, give us a little wiggle room, but my other question is, what happens if we don't? If we say finish by October and then we don't do that, do we fail? What's the consequence there?
well, that's how schedules work, is you gotta meet your schedule.
But the question being, what happens if we don't? And
Well, yeah,
my assumption
I
is
mean,
nothing.
I don't know.
Well, there's also the point that it is sort of a self-imposed schedule, and it's even a self-imposed task. So the only one who would be accountable to for meeting the schedule and completing the task is kind of yourselves at this point.
Right, and that's all good, sorry.
And so, could we agree on, for the red text on the screen, simply by fall 2025 with our acknowledged goodwill to maybe get it recommend to them by this next September. The next two meetings right now, all we have on the agenda is ad hoc subcommittee, so.
We could say by the end of 2025,
Yeah, which is fall.
which,
Well, fall goes all the way to December 21st. Yeah. That's why we go because it's September.
I think fall is a great, I think that's a great term. I would also suggest, because Commissioner Ward mentioned the city council schedule, and just getting on it is going to be a super big challenge. So the sooner we can, complete this, the better our chances of getting some attention, this discussion on the library for the city council.
I wrote something that follows on what Sean is. And I just read it to you guys and see, so I was multitasking here. Complete the work of the Library of the Future ad hoc subcommittee by submitting a report to city council in the fall of 2025, which will include a request that city council schedule a study session focusing on.
Set it on the screen, let's all read it before 8 o'clock, maybe we can.
I can cut and paste it and text it to you too.
This is hard stuff.
I think it's not the best, but I think I got it.
Okay.
Mhm.
complete the work of the Library of the Future. The community, right, instead of recommending. By submitting is what I put.
Yeah,
My
yeah,
understanding here is that recommending is a technical term, not that it's the name of the process by which we get something to sit in front of city council. Is that
Right.
correct?
Yeah, for something to be presented as representing the views or advice of the
Okay.
library commission, it should be a vote to recommend it.
but according to the, end product, you can't, you have to deliver it.
But with
Yeah,
that comes the
recommend.
implication that the library commission is endorsing said report, and so taking the vote to endorse it natural and kind of requires that.
Okay, so just the English is incorrect. So you wanna say the subcommittee will, the full commission will approve a report which will then be delivered to the city council?
Yes, typically we say recommend. There's a commission's an advisory body, but we could change that to approve.
Or you can say with recommendations. The report with recommendations, but recommending the report isn't.
Yeah.
Isn't proper. It's true.
It's a, you're right, so it's.
Well, so anyway, I'm editing my own edits, but, what we wanna do is. Submit the report that's already been approved by the full commission, not just the ad hoc subcommittee, so maybe the ad hoc subcommittee doesn't even need to be mentioned here, but.
Sure.
You could say
completely
approve.
Recommend a report to the city council. Right, complete plan recommend a report to the city council on the library of the future, something like that. Let's just see what that looks like. Well. Literally inclined people, it's not a word, but literally, what's not.
Or you can say complete and present a report with recommendations.
Well, I think the point here is that the full library commission needs to either approve or recommend
Right.
the report itself.
Right.
Right, we can't just
Yeah,
have a couple of commissioners sending a report to council with the.
Right,
full-
oh yeah, that's the intent all along, we've been talking about.
Okay. And we will be, just to leave this conversation, but I'm sorry, we're already had jumping ahead to the tentative agenda schedule, but as the chair, I'm going to put on with Nick, this September 15th, next month's meeting. The line, recommend a report of the library future too. This commission might realize we're not ready, I assume we can table that vote and not fail to the October meeting, right? And put it on there again in October, once the commission feels it's ready to vote to recommend, and that would happen in that month, or sometime in the fall.
Cause I personally think setting it for October makes more sense, because it gives a little more time for some back and forth and editing and. Have something that we feel good about, and 'cause I think that. City council has lots of stuff going on, I'd rather take a little more time and not rush it and make sure that staff is. They've gotten their input included.
And ultimately, all this line item needs to do is serve as a statement of intent to the city council that, hey, just flagging this, and we're still working on this.
Yeah.
We're going to be giving this to you at some point. As is being said a couple of times now, the city council has a lot of other things they're dealing with that are almost certainly of more urgent or higher priority. And so all we need is just something that says, we're still working on this, and we can reference back to this when we need to, or you can, the chair, you can reference it when we're talking to them. And I think that will serve what we need out of this. I'm not too worried about the specific language outside of making sure we have our kind of self-imposed general deadline in there. And to mention that it will include a study session.
Mhm.
The only other thing I'd say is, I think it makes sense to have it, instead of it be number 6, put it up as number 4, because it follows directly on 2 and 3.
I don't trust, my typing on my laptop is acting funny, so I'm just gonna put a note that that's gonna move to item number 4, okay? Rather than.
Yeah, the
start
other one's
moving around, Word will start acting funny if I start thinking about it.
Okay, is there further discussion before I call for a motion?
I did want to just state an appreciation to, it's not easy to wordsmith something in real time like this. And I think we're all focused on the same goals. We want a really good product to go to the city council that they can get behind. And I think all the comments are in that spirit. So thank you.
And would a commissioner like to make a motion to recommend the library commission work plan as with the red edits as on the screen for 2025-26?
I move that we accept the wording as we've just edited.
And
Work plan 25-26.
I have a motion, sure, or second.
I'll second that with the red.
Okay, and Commissioner Westcott seconds with affirmation of the red included.
All right, the motion on the floor is to recommend the library commission work plan for 25-26, including the edits just made, adding item 4. Complete and recommend a report on the library of the future to the city council in fall 2025. That will include a request that the city council hold a study session focusing on the library. We're gonna do a roll call vote. Do I get my order right? Commissioner Crockett, how do you vote?
Yeah.
Chair Herrick, how do you vote?
Yes.
Commissioner Horton, how do you vote?
Yes.
Commissioner Sispot, how do you vote?
Yes.
Oh, my order's wrong. Commissioner Schaefer, how do you vote?
Yeah.
That's okay. Vice Chair Westcott, how do you vote?
Yes.
And Commissioner Yule, how do you vote?
Yes.
Measure passes unanimously. Thank you.
Point of order that I want to check with, Nick. Do you think we can combine E3 and E4 in interest of time in terms of presenting both first and then doing public comment and discussion of both, or do you see a reason to keep them separate?
You can combine or take public comment on 2 things at once if you'd like. Sure. Yes, I think the idea is to keep it clear so that people know what they're commenting on. So if you feel that 3 and 4, the report out and the list of annually recurring events or activities are 2 parts of the same thing, then I think it's fine to do the report out. Or the work plan report out and take comments on both.
Okay, so let's do that. No, yeah, so the next item, so we'll have 2 items, which is to finalize the library commission's report of the city council and past year's work. And I'll just provide a very brief introduction, we already discussed it in July. And then we will also provide feedback on the annual list of required library commission activities. So that's E4, and there's an agenda of that. So staff will provide a brief introduction to that item as well, and so we'll take public comment on both items at the same time. Agenda items E3 and E4, and then we'll discuss as a commission vote.
Great, so Sean has the draft updated presentation up on the screen. It is similar to what we discussed as a commission in last month's meeting, but the chair has added and has added their comments. And then for item E4, it's just, I think, a desire to get some sort of clarity about what the sort of a schedule of the commission's work the coming year in light of wrapping up the last year and looking forward with the new work plan the year ahead. I know we took a bite at this a couple of months ago, and we do have the monthly tentative agenda calendar, which kind of does the hesitate to call them discretionary, but more discretionary items. And then the sort of annual activities is more like the required items that you do every year. You need to do these as directed by council or by statute. And the other ones are more like, these are the discretion, these are the things that this commission is working on for the tentative agenda. That's my introduction to those 2 items.
So do I need to talk about the slides anymore? That's probably enough then. Open to public comments. I just, if people did, I just know, if you didn't get all the way to the end of the agenda.
We did, but I figured we were going to delve into that when we did the discussion here with the commission, so.
Okay, so do we want to call for public comment then?
Sure. At this time, if you'd like to make a public comment on item E3 or or item E4, please use that raise hand feature. Seeing no comments online, back to the chair.
Okay, so I tried to take, I watched the whole recording of the July meeting and I tried to take the great, comments into consideration, and all I've really done is, without the numbers, which are a little confusing, show the 5 areas that are pretty, we're humming along at. I think there's 3 things, it's on maybe slide 3 or 4, so I left that pretty much as it is, but I said we're on target. But then the next slide, Nick, I brought out 3 things that hasn't gotten yet to the ad hoc subcommittee's work area, where I say we're making good progress, but I think there are things that, you know, I'm not gonna call out the city council how we're, unless they ask questions, how we feel like we can do, more next year. But I feel like those are the 3 areas that, like we haven't heard the Bellhead report yet. I don't wanna call it out, that's for good reasons, but we are going to hear that, in the coming months, right? And so that's something that we're making good progress on. And then I called out the ad hoc subcommittee's work with, on the last slide, I point to, we don't need to wordsmith it, but I'm going to repeat for all of you, once we get to that last slide, what I will probably recommend. But on this last one, Nick, with the, that's just repeats the goals of all the reading, so you can go to the next slide, Nick, there we go. I tried to take all the numbers and everything else, and again, you know, obviously in the last slide, talking about this report that's coming, that we hope to recommend and everything, so I won't go into, I think I only have about 8, you know, anywhere from 7 to 13 minutes or something, right? And so I'm gonna try to be, keep a lot of it on the last slide to really talk a bit about the great work that on subcommittee. If that works for everyone. So on this one, I probably won't read bullet points. It will be in their agenda packet, I think, or at least eventually it'll be in the minutes. I'm assuming so people will look those numbers. All the work that you guys.
Just point of clarification, usually the slides go into the agenda pack, so they should have that.
They should have this before.
Before.
Sort of thoughts among the commissioners in terms of just everything except the last slide that we need to, I'll just give you what I think I can report out. Is everyone's okay with that? I'll do that, but yeah.
I appreciate your emphasis on the sort of high level, just here's where we're at. I also appreciate the emphasis on, there's some things that we're still working on through the end of the year, but not having delved too much deeper into that. Yeah, I think you have a great, I like your slides. And Beatles.
I just have a question.
The one before Nick, if you can go back to the 3 goals before the.
Yeah, the one that says what we haven't worked much on, what we're working to be, I just, are we really? Before the end of this year, gonna work on the budget and potential synergies with other departments? I mean, so why would we talk about that? I know that January we talked about. That would be next year's. Also at the top, it's 24-25, not 25-25.
Should be 25, yeah, 24, 25, exactly.
So we're reporting on this current year.
Yeah, I don't wanna be negative, but I think my thought is that this slide, I don't feel like, I remember I gave you all back in June, please comment specifically on things, I said red, yellow, and green. Some of them came quite up to green, I think, like, you know, we really have, analyzed the facility and you've got all that. But I feel like in terms of the budget and receiving a report on Bellhaven, and even synergies with other departments, we can even say, oh, we didn't quite meet all that. And so I guess, but they're still on. Although the synergies with other departments did not drop, should we? Well, I could comment on that, but we do work, we've met with the Parks and Recreation Commission 3 times, but. You know, I've commented already, that's not another department. It's not a synergy, so how much do people feel I should call that out? I mean, I'm. Technically just sort of saying, we're not necessarily on track, we're making good
Well,
progress.
maybe instead of saying commissioners working to be more effective, because I don't think we are. I think maybe saying, you know, these were, we didn't meet the goals. I mean,
Or you could just drop the slide and focus on the stuff that we've really.
right,
done.
that's right. Yeah,
I mean,
is why call out what we didn't do?
what we realized is we didn't really understand the budget process and when we would be able to get feedback, so and we're gonna try and handle it a little differently next year. So why, I would rather have you spend your time talking about what we did do, than stuff that didn't end up being,
Well,
but that's just me.
and I take that, and I think we can probably, I like dropping slides, because it gives more time to focus on things, but I think if I were giving an oral delivery, I would say that basically we've been here, we met at the Bellhaven Community Campus, we enjoyed the facility, we've heard reports, but we realized that one of the things I think Commissioner Yule said in the July meeting, specific outreach to that community is something that we as a library commission can work on. So that might be an example. We did everything but that with the budget, we reviewed the budget at the May meeting, but realized the timing, I wanted to alert council, the timing of that, you know, wasn't as effective as might have been, so we are currently working on improving that next year by putting it in the agenda earlier. And then the final one, I could say, yes, we meet with Parks and Recreation Commission, but we realize it's not another department, and so in the coming year, we really are looking at potentially synergies with other departments or that. So that's what I would say, you know, if we leave it in, but if people wanted to stay on the positive and just do silence, I'm fine with it as well. You?
Just to be very clear about what you're reporting, this is meant to be the report from the last time that the
Correct.
chair gave a
Correct.
presentation. So anything we do the rest of the year doesn't count, that's we're just like, hey, we're gonna try and do it,
This year's over.
this year is over, yeah. And I think we did drop the potential synergies from our work plan, so that's not ever going to happen.
So I will, we can take that bullet point out for sure, and we'll just let it silently disappear with no comment, I'm totally good with that. The question I have for all of you is, should I, like Commissioner Orton says, just drop a little slide, or should, cause I'm then setting up the work plan for this coming year, which is what we've been talking about, to explain to them about that, subcommittee's report that's coming and all that, that would lead in final slide.
I guess if this is going to be a report on what we've done, and what you're saying is that, you know, we need to be more effective, or I guess working to be more effective is, I don't really understand it, but.
I'm fine saying we failed, you know what I'm saying? Well, and that's okay, we learned.
A little more objective, like we goals unmet, we didn't, I mean, we've got good progress or on track or whatever, and
Or you could just. I guess I would have
not
we found that we, focus most of our attention on these other things. I would just drop the synergies for those departments. You could keep
That's
the other two in and say that we're continuing to, because those other two are still part of our focus. So, yeah, you could say, I don't know about working to be more effective, or say we're planning, you know, continuing to,
provide more focus or.
yeah,
Those first two also, you have, as we're saying, there's some sort of meat on the bones there of why they were less emphasized. And that can go into like what you're
Yep.
actually saying there, whereas as people have been saying, I think on number 3, it's just sort of, this just didn't happen.
Okay, so I'm gonna,
So could I make a suggestion, another just wordsmithing suggestion, based on everything I've heard, and knowing that I think there's like 4 commission presentations on that night, and, you know, try to have these succinct. I know the city council members, it's an opportunity for them to just like express thanks to the commission, just like hear about the what they're doing. And certainly, you know, aren't opposed to hearing about challenges, but maybe it's just that bullet point. Commissioners working to be more effective in these areas, that seem to be the thing that I've heard a couple of commissioners comment on.
so John, and I'm already going to, or, okay, you interrupted me, I was gonna propose I go to 2 goals, good progress, and delete bullet point 2, delete some bullet point 3, and I think we're good, right? I mean, that.
Yeah, it's okay.
That's helpful, because we need to understand how to update the slide.
Well, I'm gonna update the slides, I did the PowerPoint with Nathan, so I'm a self-service.
I agree with that.
Yeah, okay,
With that.
then let's go to the last slide, which is really where I wanna, we don't have to wordsmith it, I feel like we've got consensus. But I'm going to, yeah, summarize the ad hoc subcommittee's work, which was already sort of done in the previous slide, where I really talked about what they did. And just say it will continue in 2025-26. the work plan, which they'll then see, and then their next agenda packet. And I think I'm just gonna fill in that we have a draft report that was discussed at our August meeting, that's like great progress, city staff collaborating. We hope to get, you'll see in our, I'll just say, you'll see in our proposed work plan coming up in a couple of weeks, that we hope to get an actual report to you, so you can delve into. They can honestly watch our meeting and read the packet now, but I would say I hope to recommend a report, and then that would involve the, you know, ideally, if everything works well, having a study session this council budget. So I think those are the only things. Is there anything else I should add on this one?
Oh, sounds great.
Yeah.
So we don't need to do anything more here, I think just on the recurring agenda. Calendar.
You're gonna get rid of this slide.
Yeah, I'm getting, it. Unless somebody, I will probably mention those two policies, right? On the first slide, I say we did policies, but I'm gonna say those bullet points out loud to the council, but I'm not, I have a hard time with bullet points, I just find it puts me to sleep. If that's okay with everyone. So on the annual recurring activity, I think. We probably need to just put on this is a template that the people I think remember, and keeps Commissioner Orton really got it going. If we just said in our work plan that we're going to, if we're asking for sending to council, that I think it says. Annual review library division budget in January, focusing on any individual investor library services, we should probably
That is.
have Nick add to January, so remember, review library division budget.
So staff had a question about that. I think this gets back to Nick's attempt to sort of define the difference between this list of annually recurring activities and the tentative agenda calendar that the commission reviews each month. And which things go on which of those calendars. So, you know, staff will have it reflect whatever the commission wants it to reflect between those two definitions, but I think I heard Nick define this list of annually recurring activities being, those are sort of set forth by city council or by like definition in the commission handbook. So things like when the attendance reports come out and when new members are appointed, when you have to select your chair and vice chair and so on. And then there's sort of the ongoing work of the commission, which can vary from commission to commission. It's sort of set by the commission as opposed to the city council. And then that would be more like the monthly tentative agenda calendar. But again, if our understanding of that's different, but we just wanted to call that out, where would you put an item that this commission is secretly put on the agenda as opposed to something that like the city council or the commission policy put on the agenda. I hope that was clear. I hope I didn't want to get order.
I just feel like if it's an annually recurring thing, we've got to make it public. I would hope that you're on the agenda package, so the public could discuss it, but the public, we can't. You know, we try to fulfill our duties to Brown, and I try to get, you know, that in the agenda packet that says review in January, because I heard that at July's discussion very clearly through the commission. So I don't.
I think it should be on the annually.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah, it's with annually, it's on the annual.
And then it also will be on the rolling, agenda of this one.
Yeah, exactly. So any, this
Tentative.
is to make
Yeah.
Nick's life easier, right? Just take these things, Commissioner Rule.
We're talking about the budget thing is in our work plan, right? It says do it in January, so then that is a committee policy thing that we are deciding to do, so I think it makes sense to put it on the annual one. For that reason.
And if council comes back and says, no, we don't want you to do it in January, we want you to do it in March after we, you know, they might have a comment, and then we can easily adjust our template. I just think it's very important that we as a commission make it clear that that's an annual thing. And then we get an information item about the tentative agenda schedule. That's where I think things move around.
Yeah.
Okay, so we don't, it's sort of a consensus item, is that okay with?
That sounds like a buy activation.
Okay.
Yeah. And that's fine.
Okay, so I think we're not voting on anything, so we can at my goodness, 8:25, I'm sorry. This evening. to report, I think I'm seeing something on here that is asking me to make a motion about.
No, we don't,
Okay,
we
so
don't need to, you can sort of agree to things by acclamation like you do for the tentative agenda, basically, and these two items, the sort of discussion and approval of the report out and adding the budget that we do in January to the annually recurring, okay, is fine to do by.
Okay, so then I think we're on to the agenda item F, informational items are submitted to the library commission and staff's effort to provide an update on matters of importance to the commission. Informational items are not action items, however, a commissioner, staff, city staff member, or a member of the public may request to make a comment or ask a question of any of the informational items. We just have the tentative agenda calendar. F1.
And we can start to flesh out a little more detail in meetings with the chair and vice chair of what those ad hoc subcommittee updates are, that will probably change and feel a little detail going forward. And then adding to the January meeting, of the department. But
And so I just want to clarify in this, in our meeting that in September, I think we're gonna put on there that there's going to be I would love instead of doing a study session, a collaborative discussion with city staff.
it could be a regular business, rather than a study session.
Exactly, but we're just really saying further discussion in September and then recommend. In October, is that figuring that, that obviously change next month, is that? It is important, because I was hearing some people say, right?
I'm gonna be gone the month of September, most of the month of September, so seems kind of fast to try to revise it and have everybody do their part by the September meeting, but you know, it can happen, but I won't be able to help.
So is there any objection to just saying discussion in September and the earliest we might say recommend to the board in October? Yeah, we can agree with you. And then the second thing I'd like to just.
Right, put along that.
That's,
No, I'm not going to be here for the September, or I cannot be here for the September meeting.
so they will be
Both of us-
October.
Both of us will be gone, September.
So, okay, so that's fine, we don't need to decide about November now, I just wanted to make sure there wasn't something in September we're not putting on the agenda that.
So September we'll do discussion,
Yeah.
and we can see where we are.
Exactly. And I'll just make a sort of an idea, as I watched the July meeting about the budget discussion now, which is, I think we're sort of agreed that it would be great to do something in January. I think it would be nice to have a study session in November where basically it's not about the coming year. It's just sort of like what Nick, you did in May, but it really isn't the pressure of anything about the coming year's budget at all. But just for the commissioners to understand better the budget in a non, I don't know, revising here, like, or it's, and the staff doesn't feel as though there's any discussion of, you know, we want to make changes or anything, but just really a learning session. Because I did observe over the spring that we missed opportunities for a learning session that I think would be awesome. So I, this would be on you, Sean, to consider when it is until November, but I think it would be great to do a study session in November and then have the agenda item in January where the commission does whatever it does to comment on the budget. And then it's pretty much out of the commission's hair probably by then, if you have.
Well, so my staff's happy to talk through with, you know, the budget that we have in November. I think it would be helpful between now and then to understand what was missing from the presentation in May. That we could sort of include in the, as we've kind of felt like we did a pretty good overview, but clearly we missed some things that commissioners were interested in, so. You know, it might be helpful to get some insight into that, so that when we do come back and talk about it in November, that we're kind of hitting all the marks that you'll.
For sure.
I think it's a great idea to do a November kind of update or study session, not just budget, but operations generally. I'm the liaison for the Friends, and Nick, you do a wonderful job of, and Rose updating the Friends with operational things, staffing things, programs, services, things that are happening. And I don't feel like we have that same sort of cadence for the library commission. It would be wonderful to have that. in November, like, for example, the AMH, is it AMH or AMH?
It is
AMH.
being held together with duct tape, reckon.
Right, which is something that it wasn't discussed for the library commission, but the Friends, there was a discussion about that, and those types of things I would think would be very helpful for the commission, for us to be able to give support and input and have understanding of operational issues as they arise each month. So I think it's a great idea to have that in the calendar, almost as a standing thing, because, I mean, that's part, I feel like that's part of the commission's role, is to help with those operational items, whether they affect budget or not. I believe that, correct me if I'm wrong, but the AMH was included in the budget for the year, rather than getting funding from the affinity groups like Friends to pay for a new AMH.
Yeah, like we're replacing the existing equipment with flag equipment, and that's part of the city council budget, but what we'll take in, earlier in this year, we had lined up a number of presentations from library staff about various aspects of the library department, and certainly there's lots more of that story to tell, so, that populating some of those into the agenda makes a lot of sense. That had been happening before, kind of hasn't happened in the past few months, but certainly love to bring it back and do more presentations of that type.
So it'd be great to just sort of have a more engaged, interactive update of what's happening, because I feel like the staff is so hardworking, and to have them do a whole presentation for the benefit of us receiving it. I wanna help their productivity in their jobs, maybe just coming to the commission with things as they're happening, might be really good to do and get on as suggested.
So what I hear you saying is you'd like, so some of those kinds of things end up in like the department updates and statistics section, but rather than having that just be a written thing, having that be more of an oral presentation about what's going on in the library kind of thing.
So not a formal
For
thing.
example, it just feels kind of weird to be on the library commission, but then learn things about what's going on in the library at the Friends meeting or at the foundation meeting. And it's understand, they don't wanna hear all the stuff we hear. It's just, I think, something, you don't wanna add to your workload by making a formal presentation that somebody has to come up with a PowerPoint. It's just a more regular item of, this is happening, this is.
Right, the AMH I thought was a really good example, because this is going on, or the heart of this library is on its last feeding legs, we've got to do something.
Yeah, I guess and sure, I mean, we can do that. I guess the idea is kind of to see how far down in the weeds you want us to get on some of that stuff, like, do you wanna know about it? And I think, I think the commission is, I think of the commission as being more high level about the library, and it's more sort of strategic and forward looking and planning. And both the Friends and the foundation, they get more sort of meat and potatoes, because they're gonna ask them for money about some of these things, and so I want to sort of keep them in the loop about the things that I might be asking them for their support. So that's sort of the way I kind of distinguish it in my mind, but happy to come and natter at you guys about what's going on in the library, if you would like that.
And perhaps
love
if I,
Potatoes.
sorry. So perhaps if I could just, I think, kind of touched on it, that we try to use the department updates report, which, there wasn't one this month. Typically, there is one every month. But actually, the stats didn't come together in time, so we did the report. But, but it sounds like something that's a little bit more like presented and interactive, and maybe has, just a little bit more, like a little further into the weeds. And so if that, because that is sort of a report that is kind of coming together every month, so if we can build on that and see if it kind of satisfies, but I think that very good suggestion about just come across a little bit more detail. And maybe it goes beyond a written report where we're, some months we talk through each item in there. And some months we don't, but maybe be more consistent about having space to actually verbally talk about the items that are happening in the library. Is that captured? Okay.
I think so. I think it's important for this commission to have awareness of, what's keeping you up at night. For the library, like, what are those things? Because as we're trying to work for the betterment of the library for the community, we need to be aware of that context as it's happening so that we can, better serve.
So I want to caution against us entering into a pathway to be commenting on operations all the time, because that exactly, I don't think anyone is, so I would propose that we have a study session in November that I had tried to put on the slide, it didn't get on here. There was a study session on, I said budget and strategic planning, but I mean, budget, operations, strategic planning, so just a big picture once a year, so you don't have to do quite as many department reports, every other month. But then we're about to get to finding commission reports, I don't make these meetings any longer, we could have a standing staff reports thing where every month staff would have the opportunity to tell an anecdote, you know what I'm saying? So it's very low bar and not going to that level of the weeds, but then to Commissioner Crockett's point, have that be a standing thing that you all could have the opportunity if you wanted. Does that work for everyone in terms of?
Yeah, and just in the context of this document here, kind of the second to the bottom row, I think what I'm hearing is that kind of falls under department activities and statistics. That second bullet point down there, but it sounds like maybe expanding upon the monthly update.
Yeah, but that's so a report that's in there, and I think it's what I'm hearing from Commissioner Crockett is the weeds, we can't go into all the weeds, but occasionally to sort of, this is where we struggled with that, is just to give perspective and depth. Okay, I think we're on to finding G1, individual commissioner reports, we don't have an ad hoc subcommittee report in this section, so I think we're pretty close to the end, but any commissioner like to make sure report out items of interest in the entire commission. Which is this Bob.
I'm gonna keep it very short. I did join into I listened into the Redwood City Library Commission meeting on July 22nd. And it was interesting because they were onboarding like 3 new commissioners, so they gave a little high level overview of what they do. And I'll just share super briefly, so they view themselves more as a liaison between the library and the community, like that's their focus. And, we were just reviewing our work plan and for theirs, so we have like review library programs for them. They also really focus on participating in library programs. Each commissioner is supposed to join like 2 a year. What happens if they don't do that? Nothing, but it's their goal. And so they had a part of the meeting where commissioners were reporting out on their programs and like their experiences in the programs and feedback they had. I thought that was very interesting. They also have a section of their library website, which is Library Commission book picks. So they have that, and they were very interested in that, and so that was fun, that was different. And so in each of their meetings, so they have in Redwood City, they have their own Friends in the Library and the foundation, and so they report out on both of those in the meetings, and so that was helpful, like you were alluding to, there are things in those meetings which are very useful for us to know, and so they have that as a sort of more of a standing thing, I think, so I appreciated the opportunity to listen in on their session, and I just wanted to share that with you guys.
Wonderful, thank you. Interesting.
Do we have to open up the work plan again and put the road list thing in there?
Love that.
Hey, are there other groups?
Do you want to do Friends or do you?
Let me think about that, because
I can comment that the foundation has been meeting regularly and are trying to update their website and possibly expand their social media presence, but there have been quite a few discussions about their role and what they fund versus the Friends, and a lot of interest in what the subcommittee for the Library for the Future, because they were so heavily involved in fundraising and paying for the Nolan Tam study in 2017. So anyway, they're highly interested in what we're doing, and one of the longtime foundation board members was here tonight, Betsy Palby. So,
Maybe Commissioner Robbins, you don't have to.
Well, the friends meet quarterly, so I did give the update last time, so I don't have additional update for this.
great.
Great, so I should mention something we were reporting that, I have, that I might not be able to be here in person after the September meeting, which means I wouldn't, as far as I understand the rules, so that I would have to resign from the commission. I hope that won't be the case, but if some things have changed in my family life, if I can get the Monday evenings covered, I definitely will, but I didn't want to just, if it happens that I can't be here at the September 15th meeting, which might also affect quorum, if we have two other, how many people do we need? Nick, we need 4. So if Crockett and Horton are not there, then they'll have 4 even if I.
That's correct.
Okay, and I don't think, I will discuss this offline, obviously, with city staff and other people, but I just wanted to in this. And just in case I suddenly have to resign, it's not for any reason that I suddenly resigning other than personal ones. And I hope that not to be the case, but I would be there for outreach, obviously, and a very willing member of the community to support collaboration. So if there's no further business, I'll adjourn this meeting at 8:38 p.m.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, that's all right.